My husband went on a business trip. 3 days later, a woman called me. "Can you come pick him up? He only says your name." But the address she gave me was a women's spa. I'm glad you're here with me. Please listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. I used to believe our marriage had settled into a quiet, predictable rhythm. Nothing thrilling, nothing tragic, just the life of two people who had grown older together. I was 62, old enough to understand disappointment, but not so old that I couldn't still be surprised by it. The mornings were always the same. I made oatmeal, he read the news, and we spoke in short, practice sentences that held more habit than meaning. And yet, I felt comforted by the routine. It gave me shape. It gave us shape. But the comfort had been thinning for months. It started with his mood. He was tense in ways I couldn't name yet. Quick, sharp movements, like he was constantly late to something he wouldn't talk about. He came home and dropped his keys with a clatter that made me flinch. He spoke less and less at dinner. When I asked how work was, he answered with a single word. Sometimes not even that. A shrug, a sigh, a look away. At first I blamed normal things. Age, deadlines, maybe even boredom. People grow restless, I told myself. Men his age often do. But then came the second shift. Secrecy. He started taking his phone to the bathroom. He angled the screen away from me at the kitchen table. When I walked into the room unexpectedly, he locked it so fast it made a small plastic snap that sounded like guilt. He claimed it was work-related, something about confidentiality, new regulations, corporate paranoia. He said it with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I wanted to believe him. God, I did. But then I noticed the smell, a soft floral scent on his shirt. Light, expensive, unmistakably feminine. Not the artificial spray from department stores, but something natural, botanical, like lavender, mixed with citrus. I didn't use anything like it. Neither did anyone in our family. The first time I ignored it. The second time I washed it off in silence. The third time I stood in the laundry room holding his shirt between my hands like it was a confession. I asked myself, who touched him closely enough to leave this behind? I didn't ask him, though. Not yet. I wasn't ready for answers. His business trips became more frequent. Short ones, only 2 or 3 days at a time. Too short to justify the exhaustion he returned with. Too short for the way he walked through the door, shoulders tight, as if he'd been holding his breath elsewhere. One night, while folding towels, I realized something else. They were softer. Much softer. As if they had been laundered somewhere with better machines, better detergent. The kind of softness you get from places that promise pampering and luxury. He hadn't touched our washer in years. And his hair. There was a new texture to it. Smoother. Glossy, almost. I ran my hand over his head once when he came home, and he winced as though I'd touched a bruise. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Nothing, just tired." But his scalp smelled faintly of eucalyptus. Why would his hair smell like a spa? The question haunted me for days. The final sign, the one I can't forget, came the morning before his last trip. I found a crumpled receipt in his jacket pocket. Not from a hotel, not from a restaurant, but from a wellness center I'd never heard of, printed with soft pastel branding and prices that made my stomach drop. 60-minute aromatherapy session, 90-minute body polish, signature relaxation package. His name was printed at the top. I stared at the receipt until the ink blurred. I didn't confront him. Instead, I simply watched him as he packed an overnight bag, slipping in clothes that looked too casual for work and a cologne I'd never seen before. "Where exactly is this trip?" I asked. "Upstate," he answered. "Just a short consultation. I'll be back Friday." He didn't look at me when he said it. I remember thinking, if he can lie this easily, how long has he been practicing? 3 days later, the phone rang. It was mid-afternoon. I was in the kitchen, wiping the counter even though it was already clean. The phone vibrated on the granite, and I picked it up without checking the number. "Hello?" A woman's voice, calm, too calm. "Is this Mrs. Porter?" "Yes," I answered slowly. "Who's calling?" There was a breath on the other end, a hesitation that felt deliberate. "I'm calling from Willow Springs Spa." I felt something tighten around my ribs. "I'm sorry," I said. "From where?" "Willow Springs Spa. It's a women's wellness facility. Your husband is here. She paused. "He keeps saying your name. He refuses to speak to anyone else." I gripped the countertop with my free hand. "What do you mean? Why is he there?" "We would prefer if you came as soon as possible." Her tone softened. "He won't respond to us. He's awake, but disoriented." Disoriented, my husband, at a women's spa. It made no sense, none. I forced myself to breathe. "What's the address?" I asked. She told me. When she said the street name, something inside me dropped, like a stone falling into cold water. I knew that area, upscale, polished. A place people went to escape their lives, not to fix them. I hung up the phone and stood still for several seconds, listening to the quiet hum of the fridge, the ticking of the wall clock, the pounding of my own heart. Then the fear settled into a strange, focused calm. Why was my husband at a women's spa? Why was he calling only for me? What happened there that no one wanted to explain over the phone? I grabbed my coat and keys. Whatever waited for me at Willow Springs, it wasn't going to be simple. And it certainly wasn't going to be harmless. The drive to Willow Springs felt longer than it should have been. I kept checking the GPS even though I knew the way, as if the route might suddenly change and lead me somewhere that made more sense. The sky was pale and cold, and I remember thinking it looked like a sheet pulled too tightly over something fragile. When I turned into the spa's parking lot, the first thing I noticed was the quiet. Not peaceful quiet, manufactured quiet, the kind bought with scented candles and soft music. The kind that tells you to keep your voice low even when you're scared. Inside, the air was thick with eucalyptus and something sweet I couldn't place. A young woman at the reception desk looked up with a professional smile that faltered when she saw my face. "I'm here for my husband," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "You called." She nodded too quickly, as if relieved someone else would take responsibility for deciding what to do next. "Please follow me." I trailed behind her through a hallway lined with dim lights and framed photos of women laughing in slow-motion cliches. The whole place felt like an advertisement for tranquility, but underneath it I sensed tension, like a hairline crack under glossy paint. They led me to a small resting area with beige chairs and too many pillows. My husband sat slumped in one of them. His eyes were open but unfocused, drifting like he was underwater. "David?" I said, stepping closer. He looked up. His eyes widened just slightly, and for a moment I saw recognition, but faint, like a lamp blinking before going out. "Claire," he whispered. He didn't say anything else. Something about his posture felt wrong. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't hurt. It was something else. Vacancy, maybe, or shame. His skin looked flushed, and I saw small red marks along his hairline, almost like irritation. "What happened to him?" I asked, turning toward the receptionist. She had inched back, hands clasped in front of her. "Ma'am, he arrived voluntarily, but after a few hours he became unresponsive to staff. He refused treatment, refused to leave the room, and he kept asking for you." "Why was he here to begin with?" She hesitated. That rehearsed professional hesitation that hides something rather than softens it. "He signed up for a package," she said, "a relaxation series. It was prepaid." Prepaid? By whom? My husband barely knew how to download an app without asking me for help. There was no universe in which he would navigate an online booking system for a multi-day spa package. "How did he get here?" I asked. "He arrived by rideshare." "Where did he come from?" "We don't have that information." I knew a lie when I heard one. Something was being withheld. I helped David stand. His body felt rigid, like he was bracing against invisible pressure. He didn't protest, didn't explain, didn't apologize, just leaned into me slightly as we walked toward the exit. Not one staff member offered to help us. Not one explained anything more. Not one looked me in the eye. In the car, he stared out the window. I waited for him to speak, but he stayed silent all the way home. When we finally stepped inside the house, he went straight to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. I stood in the doorway, watching him. "David," I said, "you need to tell me what happened." He rubbed his forehead, eyes shut tight. "I don't remember," he said. A simple sentence, a terrifying one. I felt something crack inside me. Not sadness, not anger, something colder, deeper. "What do you mean you don't remember?" "Please, Claire, I'm tired." And he lay down. Within minutes, he was asleep. Heavy sleep, almost unnatural. I sat in the living room with the lights off, replaying everything. The secrecy, the trips, the floral scent, the smooth towels, the spa receipt, the call, his vacant expression. Piece by piece, a picture formed. I didn't like the picture. I didn't trust it. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. That night, after he fell asleep, I went through his overnight bag. I did it slowly, methodically, like I was searching a stranger's belongings. Inside, I found less than I expected. 2 shirts, 1 pair of pants, travel deodorant, but no toothbrush, no charger, no personal items. It was a bag packed by someone who expected someone else to provide everything. At the bottom of the bag, I found a small brochure. Willow Springs Spa Reconnect with Your Inner Self. Inside were photos of couples' rooms, steam rituals, massages described with clinical precision. The packages were expensive, absurdly expensive. I checked our bank account. 2 payments, consecutive days. Both charged while he was on his trip. My chest tightened. If he had done this willingly, he would have hidden the payments better. He wouldn't have used our joint account. He wasn't clever enough for that kind of deceit, which meant there had to be another explanation. I needed answers, real answers. Answers I wasn't going to get from him, not in his state. For years I had avoided confrontation, preferring soft questions and polite silence. But something inside me had shifted the moment I walked into that spa. Fear had knocked first, but determination walked in right after it. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. I moved quietly, gathering what I needed. My notebook, my phone, a folder of our financial documents. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, the house still and cold around me. I listed everything I knew: dates, receipts, smells, inconsistencies. I wrote down every question. I circled the ones that made my stomach hurt. Then I wrote a sentence at the top of a fresh page. Find the truth, whatever it is. By the time David walked into the kitchen looking pale and confused, My plan had taken its first shape. He sat down across from me. "Claire," he said softly, "I think I need help." "I know," I answered, "and I'm going to find out what kind." His eyes searched mine, afraid of the meaning behind my words. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and picked up the spa brochure. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To understand what happened to you," I said, "and to find out why that place called me instead of an ambulance." I didn't wait for his reaction. For the first time in a very long time, I walked out of the house with purpose, not fear. I drove back to Willow Springs with a steadiness that felt borrowed, like I was acting a part I hadn't rehearsed for but suddenly understood instinctively. The spa looked different in the morning light, less serene, more clinical. Its soft beige exterior seemed too perfect, too curated, like makeup covering bruises. When I walked inside, the receptionist from the day before straightened immediately. Her smile was thinner this time. "Mrs. Porter," she said, "we weren't expecting—" "I'm sure you weren't," I cut in. "I need to speak with whoever was on duty when my husband arrived, now." Her shoulders tightened just slightly. "Let me see who's available." She disappeared through a side door. I could hear hushed voices, fast, sharp, urgent. Someone said, "She's back already." Another said, "What does she want?" Then a final whisper, "Just stall her." That was my first confirmation that they were nervous. She reemerged a moment later with a professionally sympathetic expression. "Our manager is in a meeting. She can speak with you in an hour." "I'll wait," I said. She didn't expect that. Her mouth twitched. "It might be—" I said I'll wait. I sat down in one of their beige lobby chairs and crossed my arms. The receptionist watched me like I might touch something I wasn't supposed to. People walked past, staff members in matching uniforms, all avoiding my eyes. I watched the clock. 26 minutes later, a woman emerged from the hallway behind the desk. She looked nothing like a spa manager. She looked like a strategist, sleek black hair, immaculate suit, posture so straight it bordered on confrontational. When she smiled at me, it wasn't a greeting. It was a warning. "Mrs. Porter," she said warmly, too warmly, "I'm Evelyn Hart, the director here at Willow Springs. I understand you have concerns." "Not concerns," I said. "Questions." She motioned toward a small consultation room. "Let's talk privately." I stepped inside. The room smelled of chamomile and something sharper underneath, as if the walls themselves had absorbed secrets. "Please sit," she said. I stayed standing. She smiled again, a precise, controlled movement. "What would you like to know?" "How long was my husband here?" She clasped her hands. "According to our records, roughly 3 hours." "Doing what?" "Relaxation therapy." "He was disoriented, barely responsive." "Stress presents in many ways, and he didn't contact me. You contacted me." "Yes. Why?" "He asked for you." Her answers were too smooth, too ready, like she had been practicing. I reached into my purse and placed the brochure on the table between us. "Who scheduled these sessions?" She gave a soft laugh. "Your husband. He doesn't even know how to schedule a haircut." "Well," she said, "our services can be very appealing to someone seeking personal rejuvenation. But not a men's spa, not a mixed facility, a women's wellness center." She didn't blink. "Self-care has no gender, Mrs. Porter." That was when I realized she wasn't just stonewalling me. She was mocking me, politely, professionally, but unmistakably. "And the payments?" I asked. "Where's the invoice? Where's the signature, the intake forms?" She hesitated, only for a heartbeat, but I saw it. Then she opened a folder on the table, slid a paper toward me. Here. It was an intake form with David's name, his signature, or something shaped like his signature, scribbled at the bottom. The handwriting was wrong. David's real signature had sharp angles. This was rounded, hesitant, like someone trying to imitate him without confidence. My chest tightened, but my voice stayed even. This is forged. Evelyn's smile didn't move, but her eyes sharpened. Are you accusing us of something, Mrs. Porter? I'm stating a fact. She leaned back. Your husband seemed perfectly willing to participate when he arrived. You expect me to believe that? She shrugged lightly. It's what we observed. I studied her face. Calm. Too calm. She believed she held the stronger position. But in that moment, I understood something important. They had not expected me to question anything. They had not expected me to return. They had expected silence. I was already off script. I want the security footage from the day he arrived, I said. Her smile finally cracked, not fully, but enough to reveal the steel beneath. We do not provide those. Then let me see it, on your screen. I'm afraid that's impossible. Why? Privacy policies. For my husband. For all our clients. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, so the footage exists. Evelyn froze for one breath, a single telling breath. Yes, she said, for internal purposes only. I stepped closer, not threateningly, decisively. Let me make this clear. Something happened to my husband in this building. Something you're refusing to explain. And until I know what that something is, I'm not leaving. Her eyes flicked toward the doorway, not in fear, calculating. Someone must have been listening. I think, she said softly, that you're distressed. And sometimes, in moments of distress, people create connections that aren't truly there. Gaslighting, textbook gaslighting. But I wasn't the same woman who had walked in yesterday. I held out my phone. Then you won't mind if I call the police. Tell them my husband was found disoriented in a facility that refuses to explain why. That was the moment everything shifted. Her expression finally softened. Not with kindness, but with caution. There's no need for that, she said. We want to help, truly. Show me the intake logs, I said. Her jaw tightened. That is also private. So everything is private, I said, except the lies you're willing to tell me to my face. She inhaled slowly, a long, measured breath. Then she stood. Wait here. She left the room. I heard her heels clicking down the hallway, quick and sharp. More muted voices, more urgency. 10 minutes later, she returned holding a different folder. She placed it on the table. This is all I can legally show you, she said. Inside was a single sheet, a visitor log, and there, in black ink, written beside the time of David's arrival, was a name I didn't recognize, a woman's name, Sophie Calder. Not a staff member, not a therapist, a visitor. My pulse hammered. Who is she? I asked. Evelyn's face gave nothing away. A person your husband arrived with, she said. A person who did not check out with him. The room felt smaller, heavier. This was it. The first undeniable proof that everything was wrong, the moment I crossed the point of no return. I closed the folder. Thank you, I said, my voice low, controlled. You've told me exactly what I needed to know. And I walked out, knowing they were watching, knowing they understood I wasn't going away, and knowing the real battle had just begun. I didn't drive straight home. Instead, I pulled into a quiet parking lot behind a pharmacy, killed the engine, and sat gripping the steering wheel until the shaking in my hands stopped. The folder with the visitor's log lay open on the passenger seat. the name stared up at me. Sophie Calder. Not a relative, not a colleague, not anyone I'd ever heard mentioned in the 37 years I'd known my husband. She had escorted David into that spa, and she had left without him. That was enough to justify action, not fear, not speculation, but action. I opened my notebook and started a new page. Plan, step 1. Document everything officially. I began with the basics. Date, time, the name, Sophie Calder, the forged signature, the staff's refusal to provide information, and the director's attempt to gaslight me. Then I drove to the police station. The building was small, quiet, a typical suburban precinct with fluorescent lights and bleached tile floors. I approached the front desk where a middle-aged officer looked up from his computer. "Ma'am, can I help you?" "Yes," I said, "I'd like to file an incident report." He nodded slowly. "What kind of incident?" I took a breath. My husband was found disoriented at a wellness spa under circumstances the staff can't or won't explain. That got his attention. He straightened, motioning for me to continue. They refused to show me intake records. They admitted another individual checked in with him and left. They provided a signature that isn't his, and I believe he may have been manipulated or incapacitated. I didn't embellish, didn't dramatize, just listed facts. Facts were powerful enough. The officer asked questions, good ones. He typed everything I said, occasionally glancing at me as if measuring whether I seemed credible. "I'd like this on official record," I said, "in case something else happens." He nodded. "That's reasonable." I gave him my statement. He gave me a copy. When I stepped back outside, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not relief, but solidity. The world had been shifting under my feet for days. Now, for the first time, I had planted something firm into it. But the solidity didn't last, because the moment I got into my car, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I answered without thinking. "Mrs. Porter," a woman's voice said. Cold, coated in something polite that felt poisonous. "This is Evelyn Hart." I closed my eyes. Of course it was. "How did you get my number?" I asked. "We have your information on file," she said. "I need to speak with you immediately." "No," I said. "You had your chance. Now it's my turn." She exhaled a soft, irritated breath. "I want to make sure we're aligned." "Aligned about what?" "Your husband's privacy," she said. "And yours." There it was, not a threat yet, but the shape of one. "My husband's privacy was compromised the moment he walked into your facility," I said. "I understand this situation is distressing," she replied, "but involving law enforcement could create unnecessary complications for all parties." There it was, the escalation. "I already filed a report," I said. A long pause. "Mrs. Porter," she said, voice low, "you don't know what you're getting into." "No," I answered. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Her breath caught. Not fear, but surprise. Then the line went dead. I sat for a long moment with the phone still pressed to my ear. A strange calm washed over me again. The same calm I'd felt the moment I walked into that spa lobby. Not anger, not panic, just resolve. Step 2, find Sophie Calder. I searched the name on my phone. Not many results. Too common, too vague. But one stood out. A wellness consultant in the same county. A photo of a woman in her 40s, professionally styled, smiling in a way that didn't reach her eyes. Her business website had a contact form. I didn't use it. Instead, I copied the address from the state license registry. a small office in a converted townhouse. I wrote it down. As I pulled out of the parking lot, a dark SUV turned the corner behind me. I didn't think much of it until it stayed behind me through 2 lights, then 3. I switched lanes. It switched lanes. I made an unnecessary turn. It made the same one. A cold thread ran down my spine. At the next intersection, I made a sudden right into a gas station. The SUV slowed, hesitated, then continued straight. My breath left me in a shaky exhale. That wasn't coincidence. I stayed at the gas station for 10 minutes before heading home. When I walked through the door, David was sitting at the kitchen table. He looked small, diminished, like a man half his size. When he saw me, he stood as if ready to defend himself, then sagged. "Claire," he said, I don't know what's wrong with me." The vulnerability in his voice should have softened me. Instead, it sharpened my determination. "You don't need to explain yet," I said. "Just rest." He sank back into the chair. "I didn't go there to cheat," he said suddenly. "I swear." "I know," I said. His head jerked up, startled. "You do?" "Yes." Because everything about this situation felt wrong in a way that had nothing to do with infidelity. This wasn't romance. It was manipulation, coercion, something deliberate. I touched his shoulder gently. "We're going to figure this out." But I didn't tell him about the report or Evelyn's call or the SUV. Not yet. He needed stability and I needed clarity. That night, after he went to bed, I sat alone in the living room. The house felt too quiet, as if waiting for something. Through the front window, I watched the street. Empty, peaceful, deceptively ordinary. I needed strength for what was coming next, and information and patience. For now, I allowed myself something I hadn't had in days: rest. I turned off my phone, took a long shower, and tried to sleep. I managed 3 hours. Because just before dawn, a noise woke me. A soft, deliberate tap at the front door. Not knocking, not accidental, a message. When I looked outside, the street was empty. But on the front mat lay an envelope. No name, no return address, just one single sheet inside. Typed, anonymous. It read, "Stop looking." And beneath it, in smaller print, "This isn't about you." The calm inside me didn't vanish, it crystallized. No one threatens a woman like me without consequences. And no one touches my husband without answering to me. Tomorrow, I would go after Sophie. But tonight, I let the fear burn itself into resolve. By morning, the anonymous note lay on the kitchen table like a dare. Its message was simple, but the intention behind it was unmistakable. They'd seen me searching, asking questions, filing reports. They believed I was the kind of woman who would scare easily. They didn't know me at all. I folded the note, slid it into a clear plastic sleeve, and added it to my growing evidence file. Every threat was a breadcrumb leading me somewhere. And if they wanted me to stop looking, then whatever they were hiding mattered more than they wanted to admit. David came into the kitchen sometime after 8. His face was still pale, his eyes clouded. He'd slept badly. I could see it in the way he moved, the stiffness in his shoulders, the small tremor in his fingers. "You've been awake early lately," he said gently. "I've had things to think about." He nodded but didn't press. He no longer knew how to ask questions without sounding like he feared the answers. I made him tea, placed it in front of him, and watched him wrap his hands around the cup, like someone trying to warm themselves after hours in the cold. "Do you remember anything else?" I asked softly. He winced. "Just voices, a woman's voice, calm, telling me to relax, telling me everything was okay." "Was it Sophie?" I asked. He shook his head. I don't know, maybe, or someone else. Another voice. Another woman. Another thread pulling the wrong direction. Before I could press further, my phone buzzed. A new number again. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity or maybe instinct pushed me to. Mrs. Porter, the voice said. Not Evelyn, someone younger, smoother, too sweet. This is Mara. I assist Ms. Calder. I felt my pulse spike. So they'd contacted me first. That meant they knew I was coming. How did you get my number? I asked. There was a heartbeat of silence. Your husband provided it during one of his previous consultations. Lie. Easily spotted, carelessly delivered. What do you want? I asked. To help clarify things. Sophie would like to meet you. She believes there's been a misunderstanding. My jaw tightened. Where? At her office. Today, if possible. Of course she wanted to see me quickly, before I gathered more information, before I talked to anyone who might contradict whatever story she'd prepared. What time? I asked. 11. I'll be there. When I hung up, David looked at me with a mixture of confusion and dread. Claire, don't go alone. I touched his shoulder. I'll be careful. But as I walked away, a thought struck me. If I was going into their territory, I needed strength from somewhere outside this shrinking, frightened space between me and David. So I called Margaret. She'd been my closest friend for 20 years. The kind of person who saw through you with one look, who told truths without softening them. When I explained everything, she didn't interrupt. She didn't gasp. She didn't call me paranoid. Instead, she said, I'm coming with you. No, I said quickly. I need to do this alone. She was silent for a long moment. Then I'm at least meeting you after. You'll come to my house when you're done. Her voice left no room for negotiation. Fine, I said softly. I'll come. Her steadiness anchored me. At 11 sharp, I walked into the townhouse office where Sophie worked. The building was restored, tasteful, with a small brass plaque by the door. Sophie Calder, Wellness and Lifestyle Consultant. The word wellness had started to feel like a threat. Inside, the air was warm and scented with citrus. Not cheap air freshener, something curated. A woman at the desk, likely Mara, stood when I entered. Mrs. Porter, she said, smiling gently, welcome. She motioned toward an open doorway. Sophie will see you now. I braced myself and stepped inside. Sophie Calder stood by the window. She was exactly as she appeared online. Perfectly polished, professionally poised, hair styled in a controlled wave. And when she turned toward me, her expression was warm in the way expensive candles smell warm, manufactured, intentional. Claire, she said. May I call you Claire? No, I answered. A flicker crossed her face. Surprise, maybe irritation. But she smoothed it away quickly. Very well, she said. Mrs. Porter, I'm glad you came. I sat. She remained standing for a moment, studying me before taking her seat. I think there's been some confusion, she began. Your husband came to the spa seeking support, emotional support. Many clients do. It's not unusual for men to need a safe, restorative environment. He was incoherent, I said. She paused. And someone forged his signature. Another pause. And a visitor named Sophie Calder checked him in and abandoned him there. The warmth drained from her face. She leaned forward, her tone shifting, still calm, but with an edge sharpened by calculation. I escorted your husband because he asked for discretion. He was struggling with stress, and he didn't want to burden you. Stress doesn't erase memory, I said. Stress doesn't create forged documents. She sighed as if I were being unreasonable. Sometimes spouses imagine things when they're afraid. There it was, the same strategy Evelyn used, the same careful gaslighting, but I had learned to see it coming now. "I'm not afraid," I said quietly. "I'm attentive." Sophie's eyes narrowed just slightly, a hairline crack. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a business envelope. "I wanted to offer you something," she said, a gesture of goodwill. I didn't touch the envelope. "What is it?" "A refund for the spa sessions and a credit for future services, should you wish to experience our care firsthand." So that was their attempt, to buy my silence. "I don't want your money," I said. "You should," she replied, voice cooling. "This situation can be resolved privately. If you continue escalating—" She stopped herself, but the unsaid words hovered in the air like smoke. "If I continue?" I asked slowly. "It won't end favorably," she finished. Not for me, that's what she wanted me to believe. But the way her eyes darted just once told me the truth. She was the one afraid of escalation. I stood. "Thank you for your offer," I said. "My answer is no." "Mrs. Porter?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You told me there was a misunderstanding." "There isn't. You told me my husband sought you out. He didn't. You told me this could be handled quietly. It can't." Her composure flickered. Barely, but I saw it. Her hands tightened where they rested on her desk. She realized she couldn't sway me, and that meant she couldn't predict me. I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, Sophie said, coldly, clearly, "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I didn't reply. I walked out of the office, past Mara's too bright smile, down the townhouse stairs, and out into the daylight. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt steady, untouchable. I understood now that they weren't just hiding something. They were protecting something. And whatever it was, it involved my husband. They thought intimidation would stop me. They thought bribery would soften me. They thought fear would make me fold. They didn't understand the kind of woman I'd become. After the meeting, I drove straight to Margaret's house. When she opened the door, her eyebrows lifted at the sight of my expression. "Well?" she asked. I stepped inside, and for the first time I said it out loud. "They're scared." Margaret nodded once, firmly. "Good," she said. "Now let's start planning what you'll do next." Margaret listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, she poured us both tea and sat across from me with the steady, grounded calm of someone who had weathered far worse storms. "They're not done with you," she said finally. "People like that never walk away after the first failed tactic." "I know." "And you're ready for it?" I nodded. At the time I thought I was. I drove home just before sunset. The sky was washed in pale orange, the kind of muted color that should have felt peaceful. But as I turned onto my street, a prickle crawled along the back of my neck. A car I didn't recognize was parked by the curb, a sleek silver sedan with tinted windows. My stomach tightened. Inside the house, David was asleep on the couch. The TV was on, volume low. His chest rose and fell in heavy, uneven breaths. Exhausted again, or something worse. I covered him with a blanket and stepped into the kitchen. I barely had time to put my purse down before someone knocked. Not a timid knock, not polite, firm, expectant, claiming authority it didn't have. I opened the door, and there they were, Sophie and Evelyn, standing on my porch as if they'd been invited. They looked different in daylight without the curated lighting of their spaces. Their faces were still polished, but harsher, less controlled. Their eyes alert, calculating every inch of me. "Mrs. Porter," Evelyn said smoothly, May we come in?" "No," I answered. They exchanged a quick glance, the first tiny crack in their shared front. "This conversation would be better in private," Sophie said softly. "Then say what you came to say," I replied. "Here." The porch light hummed above us. The evening wind shifted. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Everything about the world felt ordinary, except the two women standing in front of my door in their expensive coats, performing a calmness I no longer believed for a second. Sophie stepped forward. "We're not your enemies." "Then stop behaving like them." Her smile faltered. "Mrs. Porter," Evelyn began, "we understand your concern for your husband, but your actions, filing reports, demanding restricted information, making accusations, are escalating a situation that could have been resolved discreetly." "Discreetly for whom?" I asked. "For you?" "For all involved," Evelyn said. "Especially for you," Sophie added under her breath. Evelyn shot her a warning glance. I folded my arms. "You didn't come here to help. You came to control the narrative." "Incorrect," Evelyn said. "We came to prevent further misunderstandings." "And to offer you closure," Sophie added. I let out a short laugh. "Closure requires truth, something neither of you seems willing to provide." A shift happened then, a small one but unmistakable. Their expressions cooled. The performance softened into something far more honest and far more dangerous. Evelyn's voice dropped lower. "Fine, I'll be direct. Your husband reached out to our organization because he felt unsupported at home. A false blow calculated to destabilize. But I'd been prepared for manipulation." "Where is the proof?" I asked. Silence. "Where is the message he supposedly sent you? Where is the call record? Where is any evidence at all?" Their faces remained still, but their eyes betrayed them. They had nothing. No proof, no receipts, just a strategy. Gaslight the wife, discredit her, fracture her foundation. Sophie tried again, softer this time, almost pleadingly. "Sometimes partners grow apart. It's normal. He needed comfort and renewal. There's nothing shameful in that." "And yet," I said, "you forged his signature. You abandoned him when he became disoriented, and now you're standing on my porch telling me he came willingly." Evelyn stiffened. "Disoriented is your word." "No, that's your receptionist's word." Her lips pressed into a tight line. I stepped closer. "Why did your facility call me instead of emergency services? If he was truly unwell, why not seek medical help?" Sophie opened her mouth, but nothing came out. They hadn't prepared for this question. They didn't have a script. Evelyn cut in quickly. "We are not legally obligated to—" "So you admit he was unwell," I said. Silence again. A car drove by slowly, headlights sweeping across us. The women shifted uncomfortably, as if being seen in this context, on my porch defending themselves, undercut their authority. Then Sophie tried the last available tactic. "Mrs. Porter," she said softly, "this will affect your husband's reputation, his career, your marriage. The more you dig, the more damage you'll create. My marriage was damaged when he came home unable to remember what happened to him," I said. "The damage began in your building, not in my living room." For the first time, Sophie's expression cracked, not by much, but enough, a flicker of frustration, maybe fear. Evelyn exhaled sharply, stepping closer. "Listen carefully. If you continue this crusade, you will find it far more stressful than you expect. You seem like a reasonable woman." "Wrong," I said. "I'm persistent. That's different." Their eyes snapped to mine. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I didn't explain myself. I simply stood my ground. And that was what made them angry. "Fine," Evelyn said, "but remember, actions create consequences." "Indeed they do," I replied, "yours included." Her jaw tightened. They turned at the same time, walking down the steps with clipped, rigid movements. Their coats fluttered in the wind. When they reached the sidewalk, Sophie looked back once, her expression stripped of warmth now, just raw irritation. Then they left. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned my forehead against the wood. My breath trembled, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Inside the quiet house, the weight of what had just happened settled over me. They had tried intimidation. They had tried gaslighting. They had tried bribery. They had tried guilt. They had tried preying on my marriage, my age, my supposed fragility. None of it worked. But the moment I realized I hadn't caved, a tremor went through my chest, because I knew they wouldn't accept defeat. They would escalate. A flicker of fear curled in my stomach. Not panic, but awareness. I held it, breathed through it, let it sharpen into clarity. Fear wasn't weakness. Fear was information. Fear told me exactly how serious they were, and exactly how dangerous they could become. I walked into the living room and watched David sleep. His face looked peaceful, but too peaceful, like sedation rather than rest. Someone had tried to break this man. Someone had counted on me doing nothing. They had grossly underestimated the wrong woman. And as fear slowly hardened into resolve, I whispered into the quiet room, "I'm not done." I woke up the next morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Not youthful clarity. This wasn't naive determination. It was the kind of steadiness that only comes after someone tries to break you and fails. The house was quiet. David was in the shower. I heard the faint sound of water running, steady, normal. For a moment, I let myself believe everything would be fine. But then I remembered the note on the porch, the women standing at my door, their threats. I opened my notebook and turned to a clean page. Today, the breakthrough, the truth, no more guessing. I already knew where the next step had to be taken, not in private, not hidden, not in their spa or some rented office. The matter had outgrown whispered conversations. It needed witnesses. It needed records. It needed accountability. And I knew exactly where that could happen. The County Health Compliance Office. Every wellness center was under their jurisdiction. Licensing, standards, safety. If anything illegal, unethical, or medically dangerous had happened, that office would have the authority to investigate and, crucially, to summon them. I called as soon as it opened. I explained what happened, the disorientation, the refusal to provide documents, the forged signature, the anonymous threats. The woman on the phone didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she said, "Mrs. Porter, we need you to come in today. Will the spa be notified?" "Yes," she said. "They will be required to attend." Good. Perfect. By the time I arrived, David was dressed, sitting on the edge of our bed. He looked unsteady, but present. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To fix this," I said. "But I need you to stay home. Rest." He reached for my hand. "Claire, don't go alone." I squeezed his fingers. "I won't be alone." Because the entire system would be there, and they would have records, and cameras, and rules Evelyn couldn't twist. When I arrived at the building, I sat in my car for a moment, grounding myself. Gray stone exterior, government coldness, a place where emotion didn't matter, only facts. Inside the conference room, a compliance officer greeted me. Her name was Dana. She was composed, professional, and, most importantly, neutral. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Porter. Please have a seat." She set up a recording device in the middle of the table. I sat. She opened a file with my report. "We've also asked Willow Springs Spa to join us," she said. "They should be here shortly." Almost on cue, the door opened. Evelyn entered first, then Sophie. They were both immaculate. Perfect makeup, perfect posture. But this time, something in their eyes betrayed tension. They hadn't expected things to escalate to this level. They hadn't expected me to involve an official agency. They hadn't expected a woman like me to walk into their world and drag them into mine. A world with rules, oversight, and consequences. "Please sit," Dana said politely. They did, across from me. The moment felt strangely still, like the air itself paused, waiting. Dana began, "We are here to clarify several issues related to an incident reported by Mrs. Claire Porter involving the Willow Springs Spa facility. This meeting is recorded." Evelyn nodded, controlled, cold. Sophie clasped her hands tightly on the table. Dana continued, "Mrs. Porter, please summarize your concerns for the record." I spoke clearly, calmly, without embellishment. David's disorientation, the forged signature, the refusal to provide logs or footage, the mysterious presence of Sophie, the threats, the late-night envelope, the SUV. I watched their faces as I talked, watched their masks flicker, harden, crack. When I finished, Dana turned to them. "Ms. Hart, Ms. Calder, your response?" Evelyn leaned forward, her voice icy smooth. "Mrs. Porter is clearly under emotional distress. Her accusations are severe, unfounded, and—" Dana raised a hand. "We will determine what is founded, not you." For the first time, Evelyn hesitated. Sophie swallowed hard. "Let's begin with the intake documentation," Dana said. She handed them a paper. My breath caught. It was the intake form they'd shown me, and beside it, another. A blank template. "Miss Hart," Dana said, "this signature is markedly inconsistent with existing samples of Mr. Porter's signature provided by Mrs. Porter. Do you have an explanation for the discrepancy?" Evelyn's jaw tightened. Signatures vary in stressful situations. "That variation," Dana said, "does not account for entirely different slant, pressure, or stroke order." Silence. "Also," Dana continued, "the timestamp on this form is identical to one on another client's intake form, down to the second. That is not possible without one being altered." A bead of sweat formed at Sophie's temple. Dana turned to her. "Ms. Calder, well, you checked Mr. Porter in, correct?" Sophie opened her mouth, closed it. "Yes," she said quietly. "Why?" He needed assistance." "Did he request your assistance?" Silence. "Ms. Calder," Dana repeated, "did he request your help?" Sophie's calm broke. "He was confused. He said he needed to relax. I thought bringing him to the spa would help." "You are not a licensed medical professional," Dana said. "You cannot transport a disoriented individual for wellness services." "He wasn't disoriented when—" "Yes," I said softly, "he was." Sophie's breath hitched. Dana continued, "Then explain why he became unresponsive under your facility's care." Evelyn snapped. "We are not responsible for a client's underlying instability." Dana's voice cut razor sharp. "Medical instability requires medical intervention, which you did not seek. Instead, you contacted his wife." "Why?" Evelyn opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Dana waited. It became painfully clear. They had expected this to remain private, manageable, deniable. But here, under scrutiny, Their strategies fell apart. Miscalculations, contradictions, fear, and then the moment everything finally shattered. Donna said, "We've reviewed your surveillance logs." Both women froze. And in that frozen silence, I knew. This was the end of their performance. Dana placed another document on the table. "A camera shows Mr. Porter stumbling at the entrance," she said, supported by Ms. Calder. "It shows him resisting signing anything. It shows him being guided to a room despite visible confusion." Evelyn's face drained of color. Sophie whispered, "I didn't mean—" Dana continued over her, firm and steady. "And the footage also shows a staff member filling out the form after he refused." The room went silent, completely silent. Sophie's hands trembled. Evelyn stared straight ahead, jaw tight, breathing controlled only by force. They were cornered, exposed, done. Dana folded her hands. "This," she said, "is a violation of procedure, ethics, and state code. There will be an investigation, potential license suspension, and potentially criminal liability." I watched them unravel. Sophie whispered, "I'm sorry." Evelyn hissed, "Shut up!" But the damage was done. Their masks had shattered. Their narrative had collapsed. And they knew it. I sat there, calm, steady, unshaken, as the truth finally filled the room. This was the moment I had fought for. This was the moment they had tried to prevent. And as they spiraled, contradicting each other, trying to redirect blame, I felt a cold, quiet certainty settle into me. I had won the moment that I refused to be afraid. Evelyn and Sophie sat frozen, their composure finally stripped away. Their perfect posture had collapsed into stiff, defensive angles. Their eyes darted in small, panicked movements, calculating exits that no longer existed. Dana closed the folder with a controlled finality that felt louder than a slammed door. "The investigation will proceed immediately," she said. "I will need copies of all internal logs, employee schedules, incident notes, and footage. Our legal team," Evelyn began. "Your legal team," Dana interrupted, "will receive notices, not control the process." Sophie let out a shaky breath, shoulders slumping. She looked smaller, deflated. Evelyn, on the other hand, sat rigid, knuckles pressed white against the table, as if sheer tension might keep the world from swallowing her. Dana turned to me. "Mrs. Porter, we'll also need your statement about the threats you received." "I brought the envelope," I said, pulling the clear sleeve from my purse. Dana examined it, her expression tightened. "This," she said, "combined with the falsified documentation and the failure to seek medical care, significantly escalates this case." Evelyn flinched. "It wasn't us," she snapped. "We don't threaten clients." Dana eyed her calmly. "You'll have the opportunity to present evidence supporting that claim." Evelyn's jaw clenched hard enough that her cheek trembled. Dana stood. "This concludes the preliminary review. Formal action begins immediately." She left the room, and suddenly it was just the three of us. The door clicked shut behind her. Silence closed in. Evelyn's gaze snapped to me, sharp and venomous. "This is your doing!" she hissed. "No," I said softly. "This is yours." Sophie swallowed, eyes glossy. Fear, guilt, or both. "You don't understand," Sophie whispered. He was so lost. I thought I could help him." "By dragging him to a facility he didn't ask for?" I asked. "By putting him through treatments he never consented to?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't know he would react like that." "And the forged signature," I pressed. She closed her eyes. I didn't fill it out. "Then who did?" Her silence was answer enough. I looked at Evelyn. She stared back with a cold fury, a woman accustomed to control, now watching her world crumble. She kept her face still, but the cracks were spreading. Her mascara clumped slightly at the corners of her lashes. A flush crept up her neck. For the first time since I met her, she looked human and afraid. "It doesn't matter," she said. "We'll recover." "You won't," I replied. "Not from this." Her eyes flashed. "We built that spa from nothing, and you destroyed it yourselves," I said. "You manipulated a vulnerable man. You lied to me. You tried to intimidate me, and you covered it up with forged documents." Sophie let out a quiet sob. Evelyn looked away, breathing fast. "Get out," she whispered. "I'm not the one leaving," I said, "but you will be." She didn't answer. I left the room without another word. The official wheels turned faster than I expected. Within 24 hours, Willow Springs Spa was placed under emergency suspension pending investigation. Their online pages went dark. Their phone line issued an automated message. By the end of the week, anonymous employee testimonies emerged. Misconduct, faked records, clients pressured into unnecessary treatments. A culture of pushing boundaries to keep wealthy clients dependent. David's case was only one instance, but it was the one that broke everything open. I wasn't surprised. People like Sophie and Evelyn don't create rot out of nowhere. They cultivate it slowly, beautifully, until someone shines a bright enough light. This time, that light was me, and the world reacted. 2 local newspapers covered the story. Wellness spa under investigation for fraudulent practices. County suspends license after patient endangerment complaint. The comment sections exploded. Some defended the spa, but most didn't. More women came forward about strange, coercive interactions with staff. Sophie and Evelyn each hired attorneys, but even their press releases sounded desperate. "We deny wrongdoing. We are cooperating. We are committed to transparency." But the narrative had already shifted. I watched coverage sitting beside David on our couch. He held my hand tightly, almost too tightly. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "You have nothing to apologize for," I said. He shook his head. I let myself fall into something. I was overwhelmed. I thought they were helping me. I didn't see what they were doing. His voice cracked. "I didn't know how to tell you." I squeezed his hand. "You don't need to explain everything yet. What matters is you're here." He leaned his head against my shoulder, trembling. For the first time since the nightmare began, he truly felt present, awake, himself. A week later, I was called back to the compliance office for an update. Dana greeted me with a more relaxed expression than before. "We've completed the preliminary investigation," she said, "and we've made decisions on all immediate measures." "What kind of measures?" She read from a document. "Willow Springs Spa will remain closed indefinitely. The current owners are barred from operating any wellness facility pending legal review. Civil penalties are expected. Possible criminal charges for document falsification and patient endangerment are under review." It was everything I had hoped for. Dana closed the file. "And Mrs. Porter," she said, looking at me with a small, genuine softness, "your persistence prevented further harm. Most people don't push this far. You did." I didn't know what to say. For a moment, emotion welled up unexpectedly. Relief, exhaustion, vindication. "Thank you," I finally whispered. "All we did was our job," she replied. "No," I said. "You did yours. I did mine." Evelyn tried to contact me once more. She emailed late at night. long paragraphs alternating between veiled threats, emotional appeals, and claims of innocence. I didn't respond. Her world was unraveling. She was drowning in consequences, and she was reaching for anything that floated, even me. But I wasn't her lifeline, and I wasn't afraid anymore. Sophie didn't contact me, not once. But one afternoon, Margaret forwarded me a link. Sophie had quietly deactivated all her accounts, deleted her website, closed her office, vanished from public view. She wasn't fighting, she was retreating. Good. She deserved the silence she'd tried to drown my husband in. On the 10th day after the hearing, I stood in my kitchen making tea when David walked in, steady on his feet, expression clear. "Claire," he said softly. I turned. "I remember something. I waited." "When Sophie took me there, I told her I didn't want the treatment. I told her I felt dizzy. She told me I needed to trust the process. And then everything blurred." My breath caught. "I didn't choose any of it," he whispered. "I know," I said. And I did, more than ever. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, I stepped onto our porch. The wind was cool, steady, honest. For the first time in weeks, I felt safe. Not because the world was harmless, but because I had proven I wasn't. Life didn't snap back into place after the investigation. It didn't suddenly become soft or easy, and it certainly didn't erase what had been done. But it changed, quietly, steadily, like a house, warming after the heat has been turned on for the first time in winter. I felt it the morning I woke up and didn't immediately replay every moment of the past weeks. I felt it when David made breakfast, simple scrambled eggs, and placed the plate in front of me with a small, almost shy smile. And I felt it when I realized I wasn't bracing for another threat, another envelope, another knock. There was a new rhythm forming between us. Not the old one. This wasn't a return. It was something rebuilt, plank by plank. Small things mattered more now, like the way David took initiative, calling his doctor for a full checkup, asking for his medical records, telling the truth without flinching, or the way he thanked me every time I filed another piece of evidence, even though the investigation was already in motion. He carried shame. I could see it in the way he avoided mirrors sometimes, or how he lingered before speaking, as if afraid of saying the wrong thing. But he wasn't hiding anymore, and I wasn't doubting myself anymore. We were, in a strange way, starting over. Not out of romance, but out of survival, out of choice. Real victory, though, wasn't loud. It arrived in reports, updates, and quiet sentences spoken by Dana in measured tones. Willow Springs Spa permanently shut down. License revoked. Civil penalties confirmed. Criminal charges pending. Financial audits underway. The women who had stood on my porch with perfect hair and sharper words were now spending their days in meetings with attorneys and investigators. The consequences were slow but relentless, like a tide they couldn't outswim. I followed none of it obsessively. I let it come to me in pieces, enough to know justice was moving, not enough to make it the center of my life. One afternoon, while picking up groceries, I noticed a small article in the local paper by the exit doors. Spay owners face further scrutiny. A grainy photo of Evelyn entering a courthouse with sunglasses on. Her posture was different, no longer perfect. Her shoulders rounded, her expression tight. A paragraph below mentioned that several former clients had filed separate complaints describing pushy practices and misleading consultations. Nothing criminal, but enough to sink a reputation completely. The woman who had once tried to intimidate me now fought for basic credibility. As for Sophie, her fall was quieter. She'd lost her license. Her office lease had been terminated. Her business website had been taken over by a generic placeholder page. But the real sign was unexpected. One morning, I received a letter, a physical one, handwritten. No threats, no manipulation, just a single paragraph. I'm leaving the state. I didn't understand the harm I was part of until the footage surfaced. I'm sorry for what happened to your husband. I'm sorry I didn't stop it. I know this apology doesn't fix anything, but I needed you to have it. S. Calder. I read it twice. Then I folded it and placed it in the evidence folder, not out of anger and not out of forgiveness, but because everything connected to this story belonged in one place. Closure didn't mean erasing scars. It meant organizing them. As the legal storm continued for the spa, life in my home grew quieter. David started going to therapy, real therapy, licensed, accountable, structured. He came home after each session with pieces of himself stitched back together, sometimes tender, sometimes exhausted, sometimes unexpectedly hopeful. One evening, he asked, "Do you think you'll ever trust me the same way again?" I thought about it, really thought. "No," I said softly. He flinched. Then I added, "But that's not a bad thing. Trust doesn't need to be the same to be strong. It can be rebuilt differently." He looked at me for a long moment, eyes glossy with relief rather than pain. "Then I'll rebuild it," he whispered. I nodded, and I believed him. Meanwhile, I rediscovered pieces of my own life I had forgotten. I started taking morning walks again, long ones through quiet neighborhoods where the air was cool and the light hit the roofs in soft angles. I began reading before bed instead of scrolling aimlessly. I called my daughter more often, and we talked about normal things. Her job, her garden, her latest boyfriend disaster. Normal felt extraordinary. Margaret and I grew closer than ever. We had coffee twice a week, and she never let me soften the truth about what I'd done. "You didn't just defend yourself," she said one morning over cinnamon muffins. "You defended every woman who's ever been told she's imagining things." I smiled. "That's a dramatic way to put it. It also happens to be true," she said. And deep down, I knew it was. The only time the past clawed at me again was when David told me he wanted to return to work. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "I need routine, and I need to prove to myself that I'm capable again." So he went. He lasted 2 hours the first day, 5 the next, a full day by the end of the week. Every evening he came home tired but solid. "I'm okay," he'd say. "I'm managing." And he was. The fog that had consumed him in those spa rooms, fog created by manipulation, pressure, and God knows what kind of psychological tactics, had finally lifted. He was present, engaged, aware. He was mine again, but more importantly, he was his again. One night, we sat on the porch as the last of the daylight faded. David leaned back in his chair, eyes closed, breathing slowly. "You saved me," he said quietly. "I saved both of us," I replied, "and I'd do it again." He nodded. "I know." I looked out toward the street. The world felt wider now, steadier. Not because threats didn't exist, but because I'd faced them and watched them crumble. Nothing about my life was perfect, but it was honest and free and mine. And the women who had tried to control my story, my husband, my fear, now had to live inside the ruins of their own choices. There was nothing left for them but consequences, and nothing left for me but a new beginning. People always ask how I stayed calm through all of it. The truth is simple. I didn't feel brave. I felt responsible. When someone you love is pulled into darkness, you don't wait for help. You become the help. So now I ask you, what would you have done in my place? Tell me in the comments. Share your thoughts. And stay with me. There are so many more stories waiting to be told, and none of us should face them alone. Thank you for being here.